Hey, it's Norm from Tested, and I'm joined here today by Jeremy Williams. Jeremy, not only did you make the game frame, you've now jumped into 3D printing.
Yeah,
You're very excited about
who
it.
hasn't?
You have a printer bot,
I have a printer about simple metal.
which is what we built on the site last year. Will and I built one as a premium video project. It's a very reliable 3D printer, and we were sent this kind of like 3D printing accessory from Smooth On. So Smooth On makes plastics. They're a plastics company for special effects. You make molds, casts, all sorts of stuff. And this is something called the XTC 3D, made specifically for 3D printing. It's a coating, an epoxy coating, and I recruited your help to help test it. You printed out several objects we have for us.
Yep.
And
all printed with PLA, I should say.
Oh, yes, yeah. So, and the idea is that we actually didn't know how this was going to work. Was it going to be like the acetone vapor that would melt, ABS plastic and kind of seal the edges?
That was my thought, because if you look at the cover, it's painting on there and it immediately goes smooth.
Right.
You can't see any of the ridges that you usually see from the 3D printing layers. So I thought that it had the same kind of effect that the acetone bath has on ABS, which is like a melting effect, right?
But it turns out it's more of a coat.
Right.
It's a clear coat, epoxy coat, really kind of like a viscous thing. And to actually set it up, because you get these two bottles, and you just mix it part A and part B with their instructions. We were very careful to protect our hands.
Comes with a mixing cup and little mixer spoons and all kinds
little
of
stir.
things. Yep. Comes with quite a lot of material.
Yeah, and it's actually a lot of the coating too.
Yeah.
We've actually made more than we needed for this. But the results are before us today. We tried several things. So you printed objects that you thought would be cool to smooth out the edges on, such as this Oscar statuette.
Yep.
And even a more complex object. I mean, there's a polygonal object here.
Yeah, I was curious what different things would look like with the smoothing effect. Like if it did do a melting effect, I don't know if that would look right on a low poly, because you want these sharp edges. But this actually turned out pretty well, I think. This actually looks more like a off-the-shelf kind of toy, like maybe like a cheap one, but all the same, it doesn't look like a 3D print.
And it feels smooth, doesn't it?
Right, exactly, yeah.
One of the characteristics of a 3D printed object is the lines that you get. And here's an example. This is a really nicely 3D printed head.
Yeah, it's a 12-hour print.
And you can see at the top just all of those print lines. And we didn't know if putting this coating on there, if that would eliminate the print lines or hide them. And so we did half this head with the coating, half without. And definitely looks shinier. I think you can still see the print lines, but it's almost like it's encased behind extra coating.
Like a resin, really.
Yeah. Which has its own unique look to it. I like that, actually. Like I said, it's kind of viscous, so you can see where the epoxy were kind of piled up, kind of gooped up.
Yep. And that's because we weren't incredibly, we weren't experienced with this. We wanted to paint all these kind of quickly because it starts to solidify. Like the material, when you pour it out and you mix it together, you have a certain amount of time before.
Yeah, it's like a 20-minute work time.
Before it's like useless because it gets too hot and it starts to become solid. So we kind of went pretty quickly, but having that experience now, I think we probably would have taken our time a little bit with maybe poured out smaller chunks of the material and then smoothed out some of the areas where it glued together. Like
doing it one at a time. I think the Oscar statuette turned out really nice, and this is a perfect example of something where if we had spent more time with the application, we, for example, wouldn't have like a drip below the chin, and we actually miss some coverage. For example, the shoulders, it's actually bare, still with a 3D print, but on the sides, it's nice and clear. Now this is something you can actually sand down then afterward.
Right, yeah, I'll be curious to see what that looks like. I think I would do that with the Oscar statue. The lizard guy looks kind of wet,
I like that.
You do? You think that's cool? It's like he just climbed out of some water. I'm curious what it would look like a little bit buffed so that he's more smooth.
And then with something that's complex, like this like skull is a single 3D printed part. It printed as one piece.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because this is, when it cures, it sticks to itself, the resin, it actually locks some of your pieces. Like here.
So it's got print-in-place hinges. Yeah. Did you get it to move, or no?
No, it's just kind of locked in place, the hinges now.
Yeah, so print-in-place hinges are not going to be real friendly with this resin. But the larger hinges seem to work okay.
Yeah. Be careful about where you paint.
Yeah, I guess that's the takeaway.
I think the results, it's not going to be for everyone. It's not like a one-stop solution for finishing all of your 3D prints.
Right.
But if you're looking for something to look slick and glossy,
right,
and you definitely don't feel the print lines,
you can't get that with sanding.
No.
Right? Yeah. So it is certainly, it has its place.
Right. With past prints, we've used Bondo, for example, to kind of prime it and paint on top of it. This is cheaper than that, and it's liquid form, so it's easier to apply.
Yeah, and the instructions say you can cut it with what was it, alcohol.
Yes.
And so if you want it to be a thinner material, you can do that. You can also color it with dyes. Be curious to see what that would look like, maybe on like a white plastic print or something like that.
I would call this a success. Like,
oh yeah,
we came out with some pretty nice,
and how
nice
much
objects.
How much does it cost?
It's about $25 for the set, and we had much more than we needed, even with all these pieces. We could go maybe 3 or 4 times as many prints as we did with what we got.
For the people who are treating 3D printing as a hobby and they just have shelves building up of things that they've printed, I think this would be a ton of fun to give certain ones a nice little treatment.
Of course, if you're going to get this, be sure to read all the instructions, take the right safety precautions. But that's our quick little review of Smooth-On's XTC 3D coating for 3D prints. I think it's an exciting little thing to do after you have stuff printed. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for giving it to me to test out.
And thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week with another show and tell. I'm Norm. This is Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.